and we are going to start now. So, hello everyone, welcome back. We are moving from the keynote lectures to the policy panel. So the policy panel is going to be about shaping the future of EOSC, national input and commitment. And it's not going to be moderated by other person than Dr. Jan Hrušák, that is connecting EOSC and infrastructure on the policy level on the European perspective. So dear Jan, please take your moderation and I will sit with the participants and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning again, colleagues. Indeed, it will be a quite challenging thing to bring policy to a more or less scientifically oriented audience. And therefore, I'm in a lucky situation that I have very high-level people supporting me in this task. And I am now inviting to the stage Lucie Núñez to come here representing the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports. I am inviting, not in the order as shown here, Luděk Matyska, the director of CERIC at the Masaryk University, a senior researcher in CESNET and the soul of Czech EOSC by many means. I'm inviting the same Matej Antol, who is the executive director and is responsible for most of the practicalities of implementing EOS in the Czech Republic. And now coming to the European level, I am welcoming warm-heartedly Kamran Naim, a head of open science at CERN and currently director of the EOSC Association. And last but not least, the European Commission Policy Officer for Open Science, Yannis Rodopoulos, sorry for misspelling your name, please come to the stage. The scenario, let me also say for those who have read very carefully the program ahead, we have had a sixth speaker here, Ladislav Krištoufek, the Vice Rector for Science from the Charles University, who unfortunately is not with us and had to apologize for serious personal matters. So we will keep the discussion in this circle and hope that we will see Ladislav Krištoufek, who is responsible for a very important part of Czech open science next time. So colleagues, the scenario is very simple. We have here 5 prominent speakers. Everyone got 5 minutes to introduce the topic from the perspective represented by him or her. And then we will have a round of questions. I have prepared some. We will give you the floor for questions from the audience here. And if Olga reminds me well, then we will also take some questions from Slido, should they be visible. Please, colleagues, let's start in a logic which seems to be very straight again, top down, from the European level down to our Czech national implementation. So, Yannis, the 5 minutes of your presentation are here. I don't know, you have prepared one slide. This is already shown. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Jan, for this, for the invitation and for the kind introduction. I'm afraid my presentation might be a bit of disappointment for some of you who are expecting concrete details on the upcoming FP10 program and the multi-annual framework program, because right now this is still discussed at the political level. I also follow the discussions from the press like you do, So if you are expecting very concrete information on that, you'll be disappointed. However, we should keep in mind that FP10 is only one of the parameters that will play a role in the future governance of EOSC. And discussions are ongoing for the last 2 years at least, which I follow. They have started earlier. We have discussed within the tripartite governance, which is formed by the European Union, represented by the European Commission, the member states in the steering board, and the EOSC Association, which represents the research community. We have been discussing what could the future model of governance for EOSC be. We have articulated, we have conceived this discussion on the basis of 5 crucial tasks that are necessary for the fruitful and for successful implementation of EOSC. One task is the deployment of the EOSC EU node, which is already there. The second task is the federation of different nodes. We are currently in the build-up phase of this federation. The third task is about creating a web of fair data, as we like to call it, through this federation. And then the fourth task is about adding, prototyping new capacities for the EOSC Federation, and the fifth task, using EOSC to implement open science policies. So what is and what is not related to FP10 program? The FP10 program will give us answers regarding the allocation of budget, of course, and some details about the partnership strategy of the European Commission, which is right now unclear, at least regarding what we call the non-institutionalized partnerships. So based on these 5 tasks and who is doing what, the discussions have been around a number of different models which can be classified either as integrated or hybrid models, as we call them, depending whether all the 5 tasks are entrusted to one sole governance body or if they will be shared between different governance levels. And regarding the partnership between the Commission and the member states, the question is whether this partnership would be what we call in EU law institutionalized partnership, a more formal partnership, which has some legal prerequisites, or if it will be non-institutionalized, more or less like the one we have right now with the necessary adaptations. So, what is, as I said, the FP10 program will define the budget and the partnership strategy. It will not affect the financial regulation. It will certainly not affect the treaties themselves. Why I say that? Because, for example, if we decide to go with an institutionalized partnership, this requires a regulation based on the treaty. So this is much less linked to the FP10 program. From the discussions we have had until now with the EOSC Association and the member states, we have reached consensus on a certain number of topics, and then there are still topics that need to be discussed and to take decisions. The consensus is that despite its achievements, the current governance structure is insufficient, or at least is suboptimal to fully implement EOSC in the best way possible. So we need a more consolidated structure. We need probably some legal entity that will take care of at least some operational aspects. There is also consensus that the current tripartite structure should continue. So all the participants of the current structure should continue to play a role. The Commission, the member states, and the EOSC Association, the community. What is not yet defined is who is doing what. I don't have time to enter into all the details regarding to the problems of each model. What I can say is that the models that have been discussed have practical problems. They can be, they are all realistic, but they have requirements. One of these requirements is, of course, a common political will. So I think I'll stop there, and I can develop further the details in the discussion that will follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yannis. Thank you, Yannis, for bringing in this 5 minutes the whole complexity of the problematics to the attention of this forum. I think you really very well described the level of discussions where we are. You also indicated that there is a certain urgency to move forward and find a solution. And therefore, I'm very eager to learn what the association thinks about. Being a part of the tripartite, you are a very important discussion partner.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Kamran Naim. I'm one of the newly elected directors of the EOSC Association. It's a real pleasure to be here in the Czech Republic, in this beautiful city of Brno. Thank you all so much for having me, and it's an honor to be on such a distinguished panel. So I have to thank my colleague for just setting up this this presentation for me so nicely. Thank you. So as we all know, the current governance model for EOSC is a co-program partnership within Horizon Europe FP9, and it's governed by a tripartite governance until 2030. Thank you so much. But given the timing, we know that that a new model needs to be developed for the governance and financing of EOSC at the start of the new framework program, FP10. That means that effectively negotiations on future governance and financing need to start now. So while the association over the past year or so has been really focused on building the federation, at the same time, we really need to start looking to the future to secure the funding for EOSC in the next MFF. And if we don't do that, and we're not proactive, that EOSC faces the risk of losing policy backing and dedicated funding, which effectively could put all of our efforts to a halt. And given the amount of time and energy that has gone into the building of EOSC, and particularly into the federation, we see that as a risk too big for us not to take action. So we have been socializing the idea of a proposal for the governance of EOSC moving forward, and the EOSC Steering Board and Association have agreed on a dedicated role for EOSC in Framework Program 10. It needs to be embedded in the next MFF to secure its funding, and a cohesive proposal for the governance and financing under FP10 needs to be agreed by the end of 2025. I'm just going to pull up some of the tasks which you'll recall from the previous presentation. But so in shaping the future of EOSC of the Federation, the Steering Board and the EOSC Association, as well as member states, have come up with a list of different tasks. So with EOSC being considered a cornerstone of a fifth freedom for research and innovation in the EU single market, we see sustaining EOSC for the next FP10 as being vital. So there's 5 main tasks: deploying and operating a reference EOSC EU node, which is currently underway and operating and running and continuing to evolve. Task 2 is evolving, expanding, coordinating, and monitoring the federation of EOSC nodes. The next is supporting the implementation of fair data services, contributing to the global evolution of the federation, and researching and prototyping new capacities for the EOSC Federation, and finally, socializing open science more broadly. So the EOSC Association will remain a strategic partner for the European Commission, and, implementing these tasks requires each member of the tripartite to take on new roles. So we see roles for each member of the tripartite. The members in associated countries that are the largest contributors to EOSC and supporters of potential EOSC nodes during the build-up phase. We have the European Commission that's driving relevant policy making and is the seed funder for EOSC, and the Federation and the Association, which is the voice of the broader stakeholder community. So we have a proposal which is going to be socialized at the EOSC General Assembly, which is next week in Antwerp. And for this, there is a proposal for the EOSC Association to help lead on 3 of the tasks. It will act as a neutral gatekeeper driving the EU's strategic agenda for open science. It'll be deeply involved in the EOSC Federation's development, understanding of community needs and requirements. In order to do this, we are proposing the establishment of a designated public benefit legal entity, which we are calling the Federation Management Organization, to oversee the Federation's daily operations and management. The governance of this Federation Management Organization will include stakeholders from the existing tripartite governance of the association. So the idea is that we'll have a management level and then a governance level. Management level will be day-to-day operational, getting the Federation to grow and to sustain itself and evolve, and the governance to involve the current stakeholder groups. And so this proposal is going to be discussed in detail at the General Assembly, which is next week, and each of the different aspects will be picked apart by all of the different attendees of the meeting, and we hope to coalesce on a common strategy following the end of the next General Assembly. So that's it for now, and let's have a look as to what's going to happen at the national level in the Czech Republic. Thank you.
Thank you indeed for bringing the position of the association so clearly forward and indicating how one of the scenarios could look like. You have also indicated that the member states play a crucial role in the tripartite, and therefore I'm happily inviting Lucie and Núñez again to the stage to contribute to the discussion from the perspective of a member state that is very active in the build-up phase of EOSC.
Yes, thank you very much for giving me the floor, and thank you also for the presentations that were already presented here. Before my speech, I listened carefully, especially to the European Commission, as we are very eager to know what will happen in the future, of course, because there are still questions, many questions, and we still don't know how it will look like. But anyway, it's still some kind of trajectory, and we are on the path, we hope. I will try to explain very briefly how is the situation here at the Czech Republic at the national level, what we are doing to support EOSC from the national perspective, and maybe a little bit how it is interlinked with the European level as well. As I said already in the beginning of this conference, we perceive the European Open Science Cloud as a very step forward towards the integrating all the activities within the European research area. So therefore, it's for us very important, very critical to support, of course, also financially the activities that are driven by EOSC. We have the operational program in Czech called Jan Amos Komenský, which has been positioned as the strategic initiative for building the Czech EOSC node, and of course to provide our financial contribution as well. Currently, under the operational program, we are investing 3.5 billion Czech crowns, which is like around 140 million euros. And we have set up several calls called individual systemic projects. One of them, Open Science 1, is already in place. The others are in the pipeline. But the aim of these projects is to build up and to develop the national data infrastructure and all the other components related to the EOSC implementation, which is primarily the EOSC CZ Secretariat, the National Metadata Catalog, EOSC CZ Training Center, National Repository Platform. So all these things are already happening. And we are also preparing the incentives to run the development and integration of thematic domain-specific data repositories and the upskilling of academic and research institutions. So it's very a complex approach, I would say. We are trying to cover all the necessary details and all the necessary streams that need financial support as well. Regarding the European level, we are, of course, very observing the situation. We are trying to be coherent with the European level. We are trying to be coherent with the strategic research and innovation agenda of the EOSC as such. And the aim, of course, is to maintain the open federated system for research data services. At the national level, we have established a coordination body for that, which is called Coordination Board. And it's a very important platform for us because it encompasses all the stakeholders, all the necessary stakeholders that needs to comment, of course, and to shape the national system, the national instruments that we have in place. It's not only the case of us as the Ministry of Education or the state's representatives. There are also representatives of the research institutions such which are involved in these kind of discussions. The coordination body, of course, is directed towards the creation of Czech national node, which is ready to be effectively integrated and interfaced with the European EOSC environment. To conclude the operational program, from our perspective, it's not just a funding scheme, although I already mentioned that of course, money is on the first place all the time, but it's also a national catalyst for the open science transformations, for bringing the policymakers to one place, for bridging the policy, technology, and of course people to build the EOSC Federation node. Just a few words again, coming back to the beginning of my speech, related to what's happening at the EU level. Of course, we know that the EOSC right now is a co-program partnership, and we still don't know, and we are looking forward to know whether it will be co-program institutional partnerships or any other type of partnership, because we still don't know, again, what will be the types of partnerships. So there's the crucial question as the first point. Be it a self-standing EU framework program, FP10, or be it under the new competitiveness fund, which is like in the air, so to say. We need to be ready already now to know what we can or what we want to achieve. I think this is very important to set up, of course, this opinion at the national level as well, and to bring it to the EU environment from our perspective. Of course, the EU environment will influence very much what will be possible. But anyway, I believe that EOSC, being like a very complex instrument with very thorough structure, has already proved that it has place in the system. So that's my hope for the future and some kind of optimistic view. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucie, for bringing in this national perspective and highlighting the situation in the Czech Republic. I think you are absolutely right that many things in the policy domain go smoother and easier if there is sufficient money available, and you have probably many beneficiaries here in the room who really are happy that we have found such a constructive way forward. One of those who is really in top of these implementations and who is carrying on his shoulders most of the implementation of one of the major projects you have been mentioning is Matej. Matej, please go ahead. Tell us your experience about implementing one of the cornerstones of the decisive elements for our EOSC national policy.
Thank you, and gladly. And thank you everybody who are here in this room or who is watching this conference online. My first slide, as you can see behind me, is Czech Republic, and I just wanted to remind us all that we are now ending the first phase of the initiative, which was, from my perspective, mainly about getting all the right people under one flag, the flag that we call EOSC-CZ, thinking about the research data. As simple as it may seem, I am still finding that there are corners and details about this initiative and these efforts that I didn't know about 1 month ago. So when we are talking about metadata, where to store the data on a hardware level, what are the peculiarities in different domains, what things have different researchers in mind when they are caring about the data, whether they are sensitive, whether they are too voluminous, and there are so many dimensions to these problems. And I think that we were quite successful, you were quite successful, to get together. So there are just some 3 simple numbers. We have officially 230 or about 230 research institutions in Czech Republic. Under 100 of them are universities and institutes of Academy of Sciences, and out of those, we have around 70 represented in EOSC-CZ work groups, which together count around 500 people. Just to give you an idea, I think there is something like 150 people now in this room, so they are truly voluminous, and I'm happy that so many people from librarian background, from research, from IT, put their hands together and started to draft the projects that we are now talking about. Now, we are entering the second phase, which I believe will be a bit more tangible, and to some extent, I think it's possible because we already have some foundations in research infrastructures. And on a slide, you can see one example, the infrastructure that I am also part of, the Infra-CZ. On a slide, you can see data transfer, data processing, data access, data storage environments that are either already in place or are being developed. So we do work with data already at the research infrastructures. And the red parts that you can see at the bottom are the things that we are now building within EOSC for data reuse and for fair data management. This single perspective shows Infra-CZ, but we have a number of research infrastructures. You have seen presentations from Professor Kaklanova and Professor Hajč, which are engaged also in such efforts. And of course, these bases, these foundations make it actually available to create something tangible and to move this initiative forward. And just to stop by the whole picture, of course, we have some maybe seemingly mundane things like data networks, but of course, if you want to move data around, you have to have data networks, and we have to take care of that as well. So this is one of the roles of the Infra-CZ. On the other hand, we also have experimental things such as quantum computer being installed in the supercomputing center in Ostrava. So you can imagine the potential that we have also with AI, quantum, and whatnot the future will bring us regarding research data. So I believe this just complements the efforts that we have been putting together in different scenarios, and EOSC is just a single place where we can communicate it together and figure these topics out. So I'm happy to be part of that, and thank you, most of you in this room who are taking the part in that as well.
Thank you, Matej. And I think you very well presented the level of interconnection in the system we have at the national level, because considering the size of the Czech Republic, the figures you showed are quite impressive, and if one would promote them and compare them with other countries, it would really demonstrate how the level of engagement of the scientific communities into EOSC activities is in the Czech Republic. Before diving into an in-depth discussion with your participation, I would like to give the final word to Luděk Matyska, who is really the soul of Czech EOSC and interacting, let's say, at the level of scientific expertise and bridging his scientific knowledge to the policy domain. We have had many discussions with him, and the cooperation is very fruitful. Luděk, please, your perspective.
Thank you for the nice words. I will start. The first part of what I would like to say is a continuation of what Matej said about the actual implementation and things which are happening at the country. Because Matej represents the, I would say, supervising, monitoring, and background creating project EOSC-CZ, which is building the background and which is also responsible for monitoring of the implementation of the EOSC within the country. One of my roles is that I am coordinating a project which is building the, I would say, the technical and service background of the EOSC implementation in Czechia, the National Repository Platform for the research data. And this is our own contribution, the Czech contribution to the implementation of EOSC. Like I said in the welcome speech, we are focusing on fair data, all the aspects of the manipulation with the fair data. And as a key cornerstone of such thing, we agreed with the funding from the ministry that the goal of our activity, the technical goal, would be to create an infrastructure, physical infrastructure, which will be capable to host data through well-managed repositories. And this is where I am going beyond my scope as the NRP coordinator to kind of represent activities which otherwise would be presented by Professor Krištoufek about the so-called Open Science 2 project, which is focusing at this moment, it's under preparation, and in fact, it's under finalization of the preparation because it is a project to be just submitted, which goes exactly connecting this background and monitoring, the technology and technical background built within the NRP, with scientists who are actually building individual repositories, taking care of the data and creating the true, from our perspective, the true ecosystem of fair data and the web of the fair data, which has been mentioned by Kamran, within the country, and opening opportunity and also leading the way or paving the way to anyone who is willing to work on consolidating scientific data, verifying them, and then providing them to the even larger community than just a narrow one, which is around the people who are producing the data. And this is the way how we are trying with these three major projects, how we are trying to build the EOSC within the country, overseeing also the supervising body at the ministry, the monitoring, the background, more soft background in terms of the people helping to put all these things together, to take care of these working groups Matej mentioned, through the technology up to the scientists really dealing with the fair data. And based on that, we are now going to the policy level, because one thing which can be seen from all these activities is that we are, in fact, not waiting for the European Commission to tell us what we should do, but exactly contrary. We are trying to show what should be done and proposing and propagating these things with the focus on the data, with the need to really have capacity, both technical and personal capacity behind. And for the organizational staff, this is one thing which is now we are involved in the discussion with the Commission, with the EOSC Association, in terms of how actually things which we are doing, where if you remember, we never mentioned national node as a part of this project. How we are actually mapping these cross-cutting activities between the EOSC as the umbrella and, for example, the research infrastructures, but also other research communities which are not for any reason organized, perhaps yet, perhaps never, in as explicit research infrastructures, but still they are dealing with the data and they need to have the support and to be included. How to transform this into building the EOSC Federation? How to make sure that what we are doing, where we are trying to get as wide and say, propagating from bottom up to meet the top-down things and eventually to influence them in a way that for us, the major outcome which we would like to do is to use EOSC, not because of EOSC, but because we believe and trust that dealing with the data is behind, I had 2 slots, it's behind the real high quality science. And it is becoming more and more. We had seen the keynote about the AI, about the working there. And again, we think that this is an important part, and we would like to also keep a message from our own activities at the country level toward the Commission, together with EOSC Association, that we have to think about the cross collaboration, making sure that it is not only top-down and the people at the end are completely missing, but that there is a huge activity, and that's what we thank you very much that you are involved, interested, and participating also actively in building something which we can then transform as our own national pillar of the whole EOSC. And then if it will be EOSC Federation, we will definitely somehow map these things into one or more nodes. But the point here is that the node, again, is not the goal. The goal is to put together people dealing with the data and support them. And that's my last message for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Luděk. Did I promise too much? You see, I mean, this is a clear vision, this is a clear dedication, and this is a very good starting point for our panel discussion, because obviously the panel is composed such that we can, from the different perspective, tackle an activity that is of uttermost importance for Europe's science, but for Europe's competitiveness as well. And therefore, one of the, let's say, aims I had when composing this panel discussion was to create an environment where we can exchange and when we can learn from each other, try to understand the different developments, the different positions, try to integrate them for the prosperity of the overall EOSC initiative. So let me now change the order and go back in a similar way we started, but exactly the opposite direction, and pose a question probably jointly to Lucie and Luděk, because both are representing somehow the national perspective. And starting with Lucie, I mean, we have seen, and you both mentioned that several times, that the Czech ecosystem is really very deeply, vertically integrated, connecting the even politics, policy, the scientific communities, the thematic groups, research infrastructures, the different institutions here. So, Lucie, how do you see from your, let's say, experienced policymaker deeply engaged in the European research area and related policies, what could be the elements that we could put forward as the Czech Republic and bring it to the EOSC initiative? And probably the same question to Luděk. You can take it a little bit broader afterwards.
Okay, thank you for the question. Yes, of course, as you properly described the situation of EOSC and all the structure that is already set up here at the national level. Of course, I also want to highlight once again the importance of the stakeholder engagement, which is very important in this whole process. This is not only about like what the national level, at the level of ministry wants to do, but it's also important to hear what are the needs, what are the threats, of course, what are the opportunities, and everything at the level of implementation itself. And also, we need to highlight a bit more the stream from the coordination board from the level, of course, not only ministry, but all the other actors involved in this discussion towards the rest of the landscape, because not everyone, of course, is involved directly to the coordination board, at least at the level of individuals. This is also a very important issue, how to influence that sphere of the individuals to be also on the same page as we are, actually. But anyway, the question was, how can we bring this forward? How can we maybe inspire the others from what we are doing? And I think this is really like question to the point, because at the national level, in the Czech Republic, we are in a quite unique situation, and not all the member states are in the same situation. Not all the member states have the same structure, have the same instruments and the incentives. So this is definitely a role model for the others, I believe. Of course, we always have to keep in mind the possibilities that are in place in a different, of course, different countries. It's quite clear. But anyway, something that we developed and we succeeded in developing is definitely something that could inspire the others. But not only the member states at the level of EU countries, but as well at the EU level as such, because this is something that works. We feel that it works, and something that we feel it is transferable also at the EU level. So this is my opinion, my point of view.
Thank you. Thank you, particularly not mentioning money, because this would a little bit distort the discussion. But catching on your last sentence, Luděk, what is transferable, easy or not, from the Czech perspective, from the Czech experience to the European level?
This is like in a court. It will be just a speculation, so I don't know what is easily transferable. But I would like to use this and to answer it slightly different way. I mean, I think that the lessons which we can somehow communicate outside the country are the following. Don't forget the bottom-up approach, making sure that scientists are invited and involved and not left only as to look at what the others will prepare. So this is one extremely important thing, and I think that demonstrating through the working group and also the other activities, we are showing that it can be done. The other is work closely with the research infrastructures, because quite a few of them are worried that the EOSC is stealing something from them. It may be a focus, it may be money, it may be whatever, but again, work closely with them, invite them, and find a way that they start considering themselves as a part of EOSC development, not as outside partner or outside parties, which are again waiting what will happen within EOSC, and then they will have to survive the outcome. So these are the two major things, and then there go these things on, I would say, the coordination, making sure that this doesn't stop at this level, that it goes up to the government level, and that you have a proper communication channels and proper steering and interaction with the government, with the appropriate ministries, that these things are not just a hallucination at the level of scientists, but also somehow propagated into the national policies and the national thinking. I think these are three things and three messages which I would say are outcome of our own road and our own experience, how to build EOSC at the national level at this moment.
Thank you. Very clear. And I think I will ask you to develop a little bit on that afterwards. But before that, I would like to continue, let's say, with the national perspective and ask Matej, because you're quite experienced, let's say, not only from the policy perspective, but also, let's say, developing technical means, developing technical solutions, facilitating their development within the project. So is there something from that perspective, starting with a way how to integrate different scientific communities, how to approach them, how to convince them to co-design the EOSC CZ project and be ready to connect then later to the European scale? Is there something you would like to share with us in this direction?
Oh, well, gladly. I'm not sure that I have specific answers to such questions because it's really, really difficult. For me, first, the experience was, and I was already saying that joke somewhere, that we brought together communities that have totally different mindsets. And they feel that they share a language, but they don't at all. It doesn't really matter whether they are using Czech or English language, but if you put together, it's not a joke, if you put together an IT guy, a scientist, and a librarian and let them talk about metadata, they are using the same words, but they are not thinking about the same concepts. And for me, the last 3 years was a huge experience in how patient one must be and how doubtful about understanding each other we have to be. And I think one of the things that we truly, not just because of 500 people on a slide, but truly the work that we have done is that I can see that after these 3 years, we have put these people together and they can put together a blueprint for projects and come up with ideas how to build things. The second thing that I'm curious about, and we are not there yet, is the repositories that are going to be built. Because I believe, and we are pushing against building institutional repositories. Because as a scientist, I know that I want to have my data in one place, regardless of their origin. I don't really care whether they came from Poland or Czech Republic. I want to have them in domain-specific repository. At the same time, financing forces us to build national initiative, national environment. So the question is, what does make sense to keep in the national boundaries? Of course, you have some data, let's say cultural data, or maybe some sensitive data that have to be kept in Czechia, naturally, or maybe there are artificial boundaries, but we haven't overcome them yet. But then we have examples, yet again, such as those we have seen from Professor Hajic and Klánova, where national contribution to the European or international level can be useful and can make sense. And I have an example from molecular dynamics now. The community that is being put together in around the world, but mainly in Europe, that this community is just figuring out how to put this data together. They are now on Zenodo, and they need to create an infrastructure that would actually allow that will be distributed. And Czech contribution to that can be really significant thanks to the experience that we now have from this initiative. So it really depends on the repositories, I assume.
Yes, thank you so much. Now, trying to bridge to the European perspective, I am now, let's say, turning to the association again, because similarly to the previous speaker, you are bridging the policy domain with research activities, and your members are mainly research-oriented organizations. You have heard from the Czech case, in particular from Luděk's contribution, that we are not so much thinking in the nodal structure, even so we are prepared to adapt to it and create proper interfaces to connect our system to the European EOSC initiative. Would you like to share with us a little bit on the current development with the few nodes that are now piloting the federation creation? I don't want you to go into details, but just let's say superficially share with us some observations on the current development. And then in particular, I would like to ask whether you see something that similarly that I have asked to Luděk can be taken on board in this concept of a system of systems as we are developing it in the Czech Republic, a really interconnected network of the different players, or whether you see that still this, let's say, thematic versus national nodes concept, as it has been in the core of the considerations when creating the federation concept, does not need a reflection yet.
Okay, quite a lot to unpack in those questions, and I'll have to say that I'm in the fortunate position of not being able to answer part of of what you asked, because I'm not fully involved in the build-up phase of the federation. But what I can tell you is that we have a selection of 12 nodes, and of course including the EOSC EU node, that are involved in what we're calling sort of the first wave of build-up of the federation. Each of these candidate nodes met at a workshop in Brussels, I think in February, towards the end of February. They identified certain key working group areas, and following that meeting, went back into their working groups, have had individual meetings, and in Krakow in a couple of weeks, they will be reconvening to essentially kind of report back and unpack some of the key issues that they're dealing with within these working groups. The idea really is to have a federation. So however many interconnected nodes that will be ready by the time of the EOS symposium, which is in November, as well as some potential scientific use cases that demonstrate the power of the federation. Within the first set of candidate nodes, there are essentially national level nodes and others that you would call maybe thematic nodes, others that are, I would say, organizational, like the CERN node. The federation sees the coexistence of these nodes without disrupting existing governance and funding structures, and that's why the rules of participation for the federation are actually quite general. But the current architecture does have an important role for the EU node. We expect this to evolve in the future as other nodes may take on some federating capacity. So the dominance of the EU node as it exists right now may sort of diminish over time. And yeah, we're looking forward to the second wave, which will likely be an ongoing continuous wave of receiving applications to join the federation moving forward. So I don't know if I've answered each aspect of your question, or...
Thank you very much. Sure. And I know I am pushing you to a space of speculations, yes, which probably is not very appropriate, but still, I continue. I mean, apologies, but
push away.
Trying to get whether you see already, given the time is very short and we are really at the beginning of the federation building, do you see there already kind of indications for trends, how the things evolve? Because we have seen already in this very initial piloting phase that several research infrastructures have clustered. We have seen that several thematic groups have integrated into institutional or national kind of nodes. So is this something which was anticipated when creating that? Because I have got the impression from the discussions in the tripartite that we clearly distinguish this is a thematic node, this will become a national node, that there might be commonalities, there might be differences, all will be integrated in the federation. We shall speak about governance. Now we see a process with much larger granularity, or is it just my subjective feeling?
I think you're right. I think we are seeing an evolving process. I think there may have been some assumptions at the start as to how this would go. And once all the node representatives got into rooms together, they realized that there were potential areas for collaboration and for efficiencies to be gained. so I think that I think what we're witnessing is an ongoing evolutionary process of how this is going to go. And this is just kind of my personal view on this. I don't think there are any prevailing dominant trends. I think it'd be too early to indicate whether there were any particular trends. I think people are just trying to do what makes sense, what is expedient, and what can actually get a functional federation up and running as soon as possible. So I would say to watch this space, and yeah, we'll see if any of these potential partnerships that we're seeing coming together, this clustering, will continue. But I think it's too early to indicate whether it's a trend or not.
Thank you anyway, because I think we are really at a critical phase, and then a careful observation and anticipation of future developments might really help us. And if we are then able to take on board all the experiences of the different countries, different communities, different regions even, it might help to make EOSC a success, because the development, honestly speaking, in my feeling, is a little bit too slow, and it's definitely not compliant with the expectations we have had back like 8 years ago when the roadmap was created.
Sure, and this has been a kind of a long ongoing process, and I think quite a confusing one for a lot of people, and likely for everybody in this room, including me. But I think as far as the building of the federation goes, that seems to be happening on a very short time scale, and so I think after this, the second meeting of the nodes, which will be taking place in Krakow in the middle of June, we will have a much better indication of what the direction is towards this first wave of building of the federation.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure, I'm sorry that I'm not able to give you
apologies for being so pushing.
It's all good.
But I continue.
Sure,
I continue the same way. Yannis, Commission, Open Science. I mean, I have quite some fear that when we are starting thinking about a system of infrastructures, not naming them, that shall bring European research, European innovation, European competitiveness forward, we are seeing a kind of fragmentation of the space. So there is a part of research infrastructures, a huge discussion on EOSC, on data infrastructures, on digital infrastructures, on e-infrastructures, on technology infrastructures, on data spaces, many kinds of that. Each of them insisting on the differences, they obviously exist, the different roles these different kinds of infrastructures play in the common space. Are you not a little bit afraid that the system would not be sustainable in terms of, let's say, policy advice and governance? How do you see that? I mean, it's difficult in the current situation in particular, because Lucie mentioned that there is even now new messages according to the competitiveness fund. So again, trying to avoid to speak about money, but I mean, money is a policy instrument, and if there is a huge erosion down at the base, it's very difficult to come with a common approach that integrates that via funding or something else. So could you, from the side of the Commission, share with us some general views, how you see that? I know it's even not a question to DG Research, because it comprises several other DGs as well, but I mean, you certainly have an idea.
Yes, I have a quite broad idea, so I'm not an expert in the question, because as you already said, it's rather a matter for other DGs, but indeed, we are aware of the problem of fragmentation. As you already said, this fragmentation is to some extent unavoidable. I'll take as an example the two main data spaces where the Commission plays a proactive role, which is EOSC and the European Health Data Space, which have very different requirements in terms of protection of personal data, etc. So it is not possible to merge them into one. However, it's true that there can be overlaps. It is of crucial importance to have a seamless coordination between the different data spaces. And DigiConnect is working on some initiatives. There is a data service support center or some. There is a Simple, which Simple is a middleware, an open middleware which is meant to link different data spaces in a compatible way. This is too technical for me, but this is what I have understood. So my broad answer, which is probably not very satisfactory to you, is that we are aware of the problem and are working on it. I don't know if this is reassuring to you or if you would like.
No, you know, for me, because I'm a quite simple-minded person, so for me, if there is a continuum between point A and point B, it's really a little bit surprising to insist on differences, because, I mean, if there is a really continuum between, let's say, research, technology, infrastructures, EOSC, other data spaces, if we here integrate in the Czech Republic several activities, cross-domain, cross-disciplines, cross-sectors even, I mean, because it's a part of the industrial policy, and several countries like Ireland or so are seeing similar trends, that from, let's say, the Commission's level, there is not a clear guidance, hey guys, try to align. You know, because, I mean, this does not appear so often in the discussions we have, either in the tripartite or at different other levels.
I would say that there is this guidance to try to align, but try to align does not mean try to merge everything in one single data space. It's rather to be able to combine, because there are many, many considerations. And when we say data space, cross-sectoral, yes, when we are talking about research, cross-sectoral can take a different sense. It's interdisciplinary, etc. So there, of course, we need to put all this together. This is the idea of EOSC. But if we go beyond research, and we're talking about data spaces of personal data, judicial data, police data, data that are outside of the field of research, it's clear that there are particularities and specificities that need to be taken into account. So, but the idea to align and combine as much as possible different elements in the optimal way, of course, is part of the priorities.
Thank you, and also apologies to you, because, you know, I have been given the word and now I'm misusing it. And probably I shall continue in similar ways, now asking Lucie. I mean, we have seen that it was very helpful that when designing the national EOSC data infrastructure, or whatever, call it policy, because in Czech it's slightly better interconnected than at the European scale, the funding from OPEAC, from this framework program, was a very strong impetus that helped to design the things much faster and smoother. How is it about the future? How is it going to be in the next multi-annual financial framework? Do we have already some plans at the national scale?
Oh, yes, very difficult question, of course, but anyway, I'll try to answer. Yes, we, of course, feel that after the OPEAC comes to the end, there still needs to be some kind of dedicated funding towards the open science and then EOSC, because something that we succeeded in developing needs to be maintained and needs to be developed much more. And it's still too early to let the ecosystem live with it without any, you know, like financial help to give the hands off. So definitely some kind of dedicated national funding from the state budget will be necessary. The question is how to make it real. And it's not only the role of the Ministry of Education, of course, we are the primary stream. We are the provider of the financial support. We are those who give the money from the state budget. But the system in the Czech Republic is very complex, the research and development system, and there are many actors involving it, many actors, of course, taking part in it, and we need to be in a close cooperation and coordination, and we need to have the clear and the consensus with the government, the whole government, and the Council for Research, Development and Innovation, who is responsible for preparing the state budget allocation for different sectorial themes and instruments. So this is a very huge task for the future, definitely. We, of course, believe that there is still already some space for the combined funding, like combined public funding, not also from the project-based funding, but also from the level of the institutional-based funding. So the institution will be somehow, of course, involved. Well, that's a clear condition also for the future. They will also have to adopt the situation and try to react somehow. Again, the question is how and who will push also the institutions to do so, and in which, what will be the whole amount of the funding that needs to be dedicated towards so these are all open questions. I don't have clear answer right now, but definitely I can say that from the level of the Ministry of Education, we are aware of this necessity, and we take it as a very serious question. Also, we are dedicated to discuss it again with the partners as one of the top priorities of the research system.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I understand it's not an easy question, and I think our joint push will help you to find the proper arguments when going to the Ministry of Finance. Luděk, you wanted to say something here more?
I mean, I more or less exactly what you just said, that one of the activities which we feel as extremely important is to, through these stages of implementation of EOSC now, I mean, till 28, even earlier, to demonstrate to the scientific community that this is something from which they can really benefit. So that the scientific vox populi will be also in favor, aligned with the, say, the high-level ministerial, governmental, European ideas, that it really is something which makes sense. And that's, for me, why I'm always repeating the message that we need the involvement not only at the level of the directors of research infrastructures and above, but we need involvement of the people, because otherwise we will create something which will be dead since the conception.
Okay, thank you. I have prepared a question on funding, but I will refrain for that. And I would like to use the remaining 20 minutes for asking the audience if there is some questions, because you hardly will have soon opportunity to see such high-level speakers that could provide you with answers you may have had on EOSC.
So we have several questions online, and first one is rather existential. At which circumstances could EOSC fail? Are European countries harmonized in their efforts to shape EOSC and its mission?
Who is able to say that? I mean, from the country perspective, Lucie probably, or Luděk, and I mean, the Commission must be optimistic per se. So the association, who wants to start?
Thank you. I think, sorry, I alluded to this at the beginning, but I think that we do need to make sure that that EOSC becomes part of FP10 to secure its funding moving forward. I think in the absence of central funding from the European Commission, that us being able to organize collective funding across EOSC members would be a little bit too challenging to try and figure that out in the next, well, in the short term, which would be in the next, 2 to 3 years. So really, I think that this notion of trying to get a proposal to include EOSC in FP10 is essential for the survival of EOSC as an initiative. Maybe not entirely existential, because maybe once we were put in that situation, in a state of crisis, we might be able to come up with an appropriate solution for short-term sustainability. But really, I think this notion of securing EOSC as being central to European innovation moving forward and getting the funding from FP10 is really an existential issue.
I guess we all agree. You want to say something to that, Yannis?
We do agree, but if I may allow myself a short comment because you talked about harmonized views and optimism, and of course I want to be optimistic, but I liked very much what Luděk said in his presentation, that the member states should not wait for the Commission to tell them what to do. The member states should tell the Commission what to do. And although Jan in the beginning spoke about a top-down approach, starting with the Commission at the top, this is to some extent exact, but not entirely, because at the top of the decision-making in the EU are the member states. The EU is a union of member states. It's not the Commission who takes the decision. The Commission is there to proactively support, to finance with money coming from the member states, not from the pockets of the commissioners. So it's to coordinate and implement the treaties and what is decided by the member states. So I want to be optimistic, but I want also to be clear, if there is no harmonization between the member states, if there is no consensus between the member states, the Commission cannot do a lot. The Commission is there exactly to help and facilitate finding this consensus.
Okay, with the ball on the side of the member states, Lucie, who wants to speak on behalf?
I just wanted, the question, if I remember the question correctly, it was associated with the failure of EOSC. For me to get there needs a little bit understanding of what we would like to really make. Because if the EOSC is the goal, then as Kamran said, not having EOSC explicitly funded during the next phase is a failure. If EOSC is a mean, then it is not such a failure. Because if we say EOSC is a mean to bring better dealing with research data to scientists, we can measure this impact differently and it still can fail. But then the question is why? Whether it means that we found a wrong focus, the dealing with the data doesn't matter. I pretty much don't believe it, because we have seen, especially with AI, how much more we are now being careful about the research data and the quality of them. So in such a case, it's more, will we bring more bureaucracy or will we bring more research-oriented support? And there we can fail. If at the end we will have more bureaucracy and you will have a scientist tick 20 more ticks when submitting a project proposal or defending it, that's for me a definite failure, even if EOSC will continue to be supported in the 10th framework program or whatever we will have post 27.
I fully agree, and I would just put it in a different perspective. Like, the content beyond EOSC is that whether researchers in Europe will think and work with data in a more mature way. Well, if not, if the content of EOSC will fail, the research in Europe will fail. It's that easy. I can't imagine future of research without sensible working with data. So the question isn't whether it will fail or not, but how expensive it will be and how long will it take us. And that, if we are going to be distracted or if we are not going to focus on the right topics at the right time, can take us some time, can be too expensive, and maybe other partners from all around the world will take ahead of us. But I think at this point, I can't even imagine what a failure of EOSC would look like. If we are talking about the policy level and the current way of doing things regarding the data, that may fail, but that's part of the process to some extent. So,
yeah, thank you. Lucie, please.
I just wanted to say that I also, of course, agree, and I also think that like there's no way back right now. So we no, so we have to focus on how to, of course, maintain, as I said, maintain and develop even further what we have already developed. And one more comment towards the European Commission and also the priorities that the European Commission is setting up and is pushing as like some kind of overarching, like principles. For example, in the case of the current framework program, Horizon Europe, the open science is one of the principles which is embedded and in all the aspects of the Horizon Europe, as well as other aspects, for example, gender equality, etc. But this is one of the top priorities, and I think that to think about like this won't happen in the future for me is something absolutely like I just can't imagine this situation. So we just, I think, can't think about, like the support towards the open science will stop because there's some kind of failure. No, we have to deal with the situation because we are living it. And we have to, of course, adapt, be flexible enough and to maybe streamline maybe some kind of sources towards one direction and less to the other. It's always a question of discussion, but we have to, of course, continue.
Thank you. I would still like to take some questions here from the floor. So colleagues, yeah, I know. So colleagues, if you really would like to ask something, just make you recognizable, and meanwhile we will take the next question from Slido. Slido, please. Yeah, I know, but let's go for Slido first, and then we will take the two questions here in the room. Sorry for being such authoritative.
Most popular question is Findable AI Ready, a future FAIR acronym. Is anyone working at Zenodo repository to increase interoperability while it is preferred?
I think this is a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear the whole question.
Yes, so the question is about whether anyone is working at Zenodo repository to increase the interoperability, since it is preferred by researchers. So whether we are using the data properly to make them interoperable and AI ready.
The answer is yes. The short answer is yes, and Zenodo is built on an open source framework called Invenio RDM, and one of the core purposes of having this open source framework is to help advance interoperability, and so as these developments are happening, they will appear in Zenodo as well.
Yes, thank you. Now let's take the two questions here from the colleagues in the room.
So I have a question.
Just if you could identify yourself.
My name is Bernd Sauruck. I'm from Technical University of Vienna. And I have a question regarding the task 4, which is research and prototyping new capacities for the EOSC Federation. Could you please elaborate how you see this, or what do you exactly mean by this? And how does it differ to task 2, which is building and managing and evolving the EOSC Federation? And if the EOSC Association plans to do this in-house, or is it some sort of community-driven, bottom-up co-creation approach?
This is an excellent question for which I cannot give you an immediate answer because it's not essentially part of my role, and I apologize. Bob Jones, who is now Special Envoy to the EOSC Association is responsible for these aspects of building the association. I do see them as two distinct aspects. One is, as you know, we're at the moment building the federation, starting with 12, and I mean, who knows how many nodes we're going to be going up to in the subsequent years. All of that we see as being one specific task, whereas defining new technological capabilities to deploy across the federation, we see as being another task. For that, we see the association playing a guiding role, but working with organizations, participants in the federation, institutions from member states. So we see that as being a very collaborative process, which is one that we can play a guiding and coordinating role on, but as a matter of necessity, it being a participatory process across members of the association.
Okay, thank you. David Novák from the Institute of Archaeology of the Czech Academy of Sciences. Actually, when speaking about EOSC, I'm just wondering, every time we describe it, from my point of view, it looks like a research infrastructure by itself. And I'm curious why we do not consider it like that. If considering EOSC research infrastructure, if it wouldn't just simplify things, both in the communication and in the financing schemes and so on.
Who wants to take that?
I know. I mean, I must admit that this is exactly for me, and I will express my personal opinion on that to be clear. For me, this is a nice example of the uncertainty which we have with EOSC since its beginning, because at the EOSC concept explicitly has been introduced into the European, say, ecosystem around 2016 with a clear message. This is not another e-infrastructure. And from my perspective, it took almost 10 years to understand, oh, probably it is an infrastructure. And what we are dealing now with is that, I think Jan mentioned it once or someone else, that it can be considered, and again, my personal opinion, as a meta infrastructure, because that's what I am explicitly pushing forward, how we will find a proper interaction between the EOSC and the existing infrastructures. Because we, through EOSC, we don't want to steal what the current infrastructures are doing. But on the other hand, we are saying that focusing, say, the data and the web of services around the data, we are focusing on going from the scopes of individual research infrastructures and somehow support cross-infrastructure collaboration. On the other hand, what, for example, Jana Klanova presented this morning is another approach to the same goal, how to get cross-cutting access to the data which previously were considered as a narrow niches interesting only for those well acquainted with the knowledge about this or that. And now we are seeing that the real benefit is getting cut through to having people thinking how I will combine medical data with social data, with economy data, which are produced and collected completely independently, because I have some clever ideas which may they help us to better communicate, for example, the vaccination campaigns, or to deal with reasons why some regions are poor and remaining poor regardless how much money we pour on them, and this kind of stuff, where we discover that a single source of information is enough. So for me, and that's why when I spoke about the failure, for me, if we will be able to somehow support these cross-cutting activities through EOSC, then it will be success. And then I don't care too much whether we call it an infrastructure, whether we call it a meta infrastructure, or whether we keep the title EOSC because we don't know what it is. Definitely it's not cloud.
Full echo on my side here. I have been asking this question back in 2018 when sitting on the EOSC executive board and discussing the principles. There is some development, obviously. Colleagues, time is running fast, so the last question, either from Slido or here from the room, who comes first? Who comes fast? Yes, please.
Okay, so I understand that EOSC is for scientific data, but as you know, a big portion, including the exposomes, could be used, this data could be used for emerging data-driven healthcare in Europe. And so my question is if EOSC has any plans or how they want to link and position itself against this emerging healthcare development.
Yeah, colleagues, who wants to? No, I don't want to ask this particular question because it would be not a politically correct answer. So somebody who wants to comment on?
Well, paraphrasing the leitmotif we have, open as possible, closed as necessary, I would say interlinked as possible, fragmented as necessary. So that's the only answer I can use.
No, okay, let's just ask whether there is a final question on Slido, because we still have like 1 minute.
Okay, so the next question is more about the Czech national environment. Is it going to be implemented any automatization within the aforementioned national data repository to upload all metadata from Web of Science or Scopus where it exists?
Very, very general answer is yes, we have plans to do the automatization of as many processes as possible. In particular, for this one, I think that we didn't thought about it because it for me looks more as the bibliography related, but I will give word to Matej.
Let's probably come with my thoughts how I understand this question, because I mean, what we are speaking about is creating data fair by design. And the question could be read as how much of the past created data will be verified a posteriori?
Yeah, that doesn't have an answer, I think. Now, technically, it's not a problem, of course, to harvest the data, and we have done that to some extent. So I think the technical guys already pulled the metadata from Zenodo, and that's not really an issue. The other thing is whether we want to design that into the national metadata directory, and the answer is perhaps, maybe, I don't know, in a third version. We now have to work on incorporating the new national metadata model, and after that, if we have the use cases, we can also use that as a window to data outside of Czech Republic. But there are services for that. So the question is, like, what purpose would it fulfill? And regarding the verification of already existing data, there is countless efforts going that way. Sometimes you can do that. Sometimes the data just don't have the quality, so you can't retrieve the metadata, and that's that. So, yeah.
Okay, colleagues, by that, our time is over. Olga looks very... Okay, no, I'm not commenting on that. So our time is over. I think the panelists deserved a big applause, and thank you for listening.
And the moderator as well, once again, please.